Okay, let's jump into this. Imagine it's just a regular Thursday afternoon, June 12th, 2025, in Ahmedabad, India.
Right. Hot day. People just going about their business.
Exactly. And up at the airport, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International, you've got Air India Flight AI171 getting ready.
A Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. Nice, modern plane.
Supposed to be heading to London Gatwick. Packed flight, 242 people on board. Just a, routine long-haul flight.
Or what should have been routine, but it barely even got started.
No,
Yeah.
it just didn't really leave the ground, did it?
Tragically, no. What happened was just incredibly fast. The plane lifts off. It's 2 p.m. local time.
Okay.
And minutes later, it's only reached an altitude of 825 feet.
825 feet, that's nothing. Like skyscraper height, maybe less.
Precisely. Extremely low for that phase. And then you get that chilling call.
The Mayday.
The Mayday call. And almost immediately after that, they lost contact with air traffic control.
Wow. Losing contact that fast, at that altitude, it just paints a picture of something going catastrophically wrong, doesn't it? Right away.
Absolutely. There wasn't time for much else.
Wow.
The plane didn't divert, didn't seem to try and turn back. It just plummeted.
Straight down into a residential area near the airport.
Yes, specifically into an area called Meghaninagar. It actually hit a doctor's hostel, part of the BJ Medical College complex.
Oh no, a hostel.
Yeah. Eyewitnesses described just, well, utter devastation, a massive fireball on impact, debris everywhere.
Just horrific. And the human cost?
Total loss. Everyone on board, the 230 passengers, the 12 crew members, all 242 people, gone.
And casualties on the ground too, you mentioned, because it hit the hostel.
Yes, there were additional ground casualties. The scale of this is just immense.
And the shock waves, they spread instantly, didn't they?
Yeah.
Way beyond Ahmedabad.
Oh, immediately. While rescue crews were scrambling on the ground, the news hit the financial markets hard, especially for Boeing.
Right, the manufacturer, their stock price.
Plummeted. Over 7% down in pre-market trading. Just like that. Billions wiped off their value within minutes.
Wow. That fast reaction tells you a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. It signals that this isn't just about this one awful accident. It's crucial to understand the facts here, absolutely.
Of course.
But we also have to place it in context.
Yeah.
Boeing's recent history has been turbulent, to say the least.
Right. So investors are reacting to that history as much as to this specific event.
Exactly. There's intense scrutiny already.
Yeah.
So this deep dive, it's about the facts of Ahmedabad, the fallout for Boeing, and what it all means for you watching this unfold.
Okay, so let's really focus in. Piece together what we know about that afternoon. The flight took off dead on 2 p.m., you said.
Correct. 2 p.m. local time. The aircraft itself, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. Tail number VTANB.
And not a brand new plane.
No. Delivered back in January 2014, so about 11 years old.
Okay. And the people on board, a mix of nationalities.
A real mix. We know there were 230 passengers, 12 crew, predominantly Indian nationals, 169 of them, but also 53 British citizens, 7 Portuguese, and 1 Canadian, each with their own story, their own reason for that journey.
And the pilots, experienced.
Seems so. Captain Sumit Sabharwal had 8,200 flight hours. That's quite a bit of experience.
Yeah.
And the first officer, Clive Kundar, had 1,100 hours.
So a seasoned crew. The flight leaves Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International, climbs to just 825 feet.
Sends the Mayday.
And then silence. And the crash site, hitting that doctor's hostel, it really brings home the impact beyond just the aircraft itself.
Absolutely. The human cost, confirmed, all 242 on board lost their lives. Initial reports mentioned recovering 204 bodies from the site, which just shows the devastation.
And it's being called the worst air disaster in India in a decade.
Tragically, yes, is the comparison being made.
The response on the ground must have been frantic.
Incredibly urgent. The chief minister of Gujarat ordered rescue operations on a, quote, war footing.
Right. You saw fire engines, emergency crews rushing there, NDRF teams too.
Yes, the NDRF, that's India's National Disaster Response Force, they're the specialists for these kinds of major incidents. They set up green corridors, hoping to get any potential injured out quickly, but, well, sadly, no survivors were found from the flight.
Just heartbreaking. And the police set up a hotline for families, I saw.
They did. 079-256-20359. Just trying to manage that immediate, desperate need for information.
And Air India, they're owned by the Tata Group now, right? Since 2022?
That's correct. Tata Group took over. Air India put out statements expressing sorrow.
Did the Tata leadership comment?
Yes. The chairman, N. Chandrasekaran, posted on X, called it a tragic accident, offered support to the families.
Okay.
Air India also set up its own hotline, 1-800 5691444 and announced compensation 1 crore per victim.
Which is roughly, what, 120,000 US?
Around that, yes.
Yeah.
About $120,000.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the plane itself, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner.
Right. Often called Boeing's crown jewel.
Why is that? What makes it special?
Well, it's known for its advanced materials, lots of composites, makes it lighter, more fuel efficient. It's designed for long-haul comfort. A really modern, popular plane.
How many are flying?
Over 11,175 of them are in service globally. It's a workhorse of long-haul fleets.
And this is the really striking part, isn't it? Before this, its safety record.
Immaculate. That's the word often used. For 15 years of operation, the 787 had no previous fatal accidents. None.
0 fatal crashes in 15 years.
Correct. Which is exactly why this incident in Ahmedabad is so baffling to aviation experts.
Right, because you have this modern plane, known for being reliable, safe, and it crashes catastrophically just minutes after takeoff, which is already, statistically, a risky phase of flight.
Exactly. But for this plane, highly, highly unusual. Analysts are saying this could be one of the worst incidents in Indian aviation history for decades, partly because it involves the Dreamliner.
And there's that visual clue that emerged quickly from videos taken by people on the ground.
Yes. Videos seem to show the plane climbing, but with its landing gear still down. Extended.
Which is not normal for that stage.
Definitely not normal. You retract the gear very soon after liftoff. Better aerodynamics, better climb performance.
So what could that mean? Gear down during ascent.
Well, it's a huge red flag for investigators. It could mean several things. Maybe a mechanical problem preventing retraction. Maybe a system warning that told the pilots not to retract it. Or maybe they were trying to deal with some other emergency and didn't retract it, or couldn't.
A critical clue, then.
Absolutely critical. It makes the plane look like it's on approach, not taking off, as one consultant noted. It's just wrong for that phase of flight.
And the investigation is already moving full steam ahead, led by India's DGCA.
Yes, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation is leading it. Boeing, as the manufacturer, is involved. General Electric, too. They made the engines for this specific plane.
Standard procedure for them to be involved?
Absolutely. They need to be.
And the main focus right now is getting those black boxes.
That's priority number 1. The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. They hold the key, really. The sequence of events, the sounds in the cockpit, the system data.
And we heard some early reports suggesting no obvious mechanical problems were flagged before takeoff.
Yeah, those initial reports seem to indicate that, which, if true, just adds another layer to the mystery. Makes it even more puzzling for experts trying to understand what could have gone so wrong so fast.
This crash really couldn't have come at a worse time for Boeing, could it? They're already under such intense scrutiny.
No, it really couldn't have. They are, as you say, no stranger to turbulence recently.
And that market reaction, the stock dropping over 7%, it reflects that broader context, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Investors weren't just reacting to one crash. They saw the stock close around $214, then plunge towards, $196, $197 in pre-market. That's nervousness rooted in recent history.
People are remembering, well, they're haunted by Boeing's past, as some put it.
Exactly. You can't disconnect this from the 2 737 MAX X tragedies. Lion Air in 2018, Ethiopian Airlines in 2019.
346 lives lost in those 2 crashes led to the MAX being grounded worldwide.
And linked to that MCS flight control system issue.
Right, the maneuvering characteristics augmentation system, the software problem that overwhelmed the pilots.
Precisely. And then much more recently, you had that Alaska Airlines incident, January 2024.
The door plug blowing out mid-flight on a 737 MX-9. Terrifying.
Terrifying. And ultimately traced back to missing or loose bolts, a manufacturing quality issue.
And it's impossible not to mention the whistleblower, John Barnett. He raised concerns specifically about the 787 production line back in 2019, didn't he? Faulty parts, oxygen systems?
He did. His concerns were specifically about the 787 line in South Carolina. And while his death in March 2024 was ruled self-inflicted and isn't directly related to this crash cause,
it's still part of that larger narrative around Boeing's quality control challenges that people remember.
it contributes to the overall climate of concern, yes. But the absolutely crucial point here, technically, is that this Ahmedabad crash, it's the very first fatal accident involving the 787 Dreamliner itself.
First one in 15 years of service.
Which makes it incredibly significant. Coming after the MAX issues, after the Alaska incident, it just amplifies all those existing fears about production quality, safety culture.
You see talk online among analysts about fears of a potential regulatory crackdown What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means regulators like the FAA in the US, EASA in Europe, and others stepping up their oversight. It could mean slower certification for new designs or variants. It could mean limits on how many planes Boeing is allowed to produce until they satisfy regulators about quality control.
So slower deliveries, potentially, more scrutiny.
Exactly. And maybe even temporary groundings or mandatory inspections if a systemic issue is suspected across the fleet. It all adds up to significant reputation risk, as they call it, and potentially huge financial costs.
And this lands right on the desk of their CEO, Kelly Orthberg. She came in specifically to try and fix these problems, right? Rebuild trust.
Yes, that's been her mandate. Rebuild trust with regulators, airlines, the flying public, stabilize production. This crash is a massive setback for those efforts, a huge challenge.
Let's widen the lens a bit. Think about aviation in India itself. This crash happens in a market that's just booming.
Absolutely booming. It's the third largest air market in the world, and the growth trajectory has been steep.
Driven partly by government policy, making flying more accessible.
Yes, Prime Minister Modi's government has pushed hard to connect smaller towns and cities by air, expand accessibility. It's a market with enormous potential.
But with that rapid growth come challenges.
Big challenges. Things like managing airspace that gets more and more crowded, ensuring airport infrastructure keeps pace, and crucially, maintaining rigorous safety oversight across the board. A disaster like this throws those challenges into sharp relief.
There was another major crash in India a few years ago, wasn't there, in Kozhikode?
Yes, in 2020, an Air India Express Boeing 737 overshot the runway in bad weather. A terrible accident, 21 people died.
But the scale of this Ahmedabad crash, 242 people. It's just on another level.
Tragically, yes, far, far larger in terms of loss of life. And an incident like this, of this magnitude, involving a flagship plane like the 787, it will inevitably trigger intense discussions and calls for safety reforms within India's aviation system.
And what about Air India? Under Tata ownership, they had big plans for modernization, right? Fleet renewal.
Huge plans. They've been trying to revitalize the airline, big orders placed, aiming to add something like 100 new planes by 2027. This is a serious blow to those efforts, obviously first in terms of the human tragedy, but also for their operational planes.
And there was some issue with Boeing deliveries already, wasn't there, even before this?
Yeah, an interesting point. Air India was apparently facing some delays on existing Boeing orders, partly due to a strike at a U.S. factory that pushed some expected deliveries into June 2025 anyway.
So this crash and any potential impact on Boeing's production or certifications going forward could complicate Air India's fleet plans even further.
It certainly could add another layer of complexity to their modernization timeline.
So, looking ahead now, it all comes down to the investigation, doesn't it? Led by the DGCA, with Boeing and GE participating.
Everything hinges on that. Their findings are absolutely crucial. They need to pinpoint the cause. Was it maintenance? Was it a specific system failure on the plane? Was it something about the design, the manufacturing? Or something else entirely, like, pilot factors under duress?
They have to figure out if there are systemic issues here.
That's the key question. Is this a one-off tragic event, or does it point to a broader problem? Either with the 787 model itself, its production, or maybe even operational procedures.
And if they do find systemic issues related to the plane, what happens then?
Well, the consequences for Boeing could be very severe. You could be looking at mandatory inspections across the entire 787 fleet worldwide, potentially grounding orders, though that's a huge step. Definitely stricter regulations, more oversight.
Which would impact production, finances, and that reputation they're trying so hard to rebuild.
Absolutely. It would be another major blow. So for Air India dealing with this immense loss, and for Boeing facing these huge questions about their flagship wide body, the focus has to be crystal clear.
Find out what happened.
Find out exactly what happened, ensure accountability, and make damn sure that whatever changes are needed get implemented so this kind of tragedy can never, ever happen again.
This crash, Air India Flight AI171, it's just devastating on so many levels. First and foremost, the unimaginable grief for the families.
Absolutely. The human cost is paramount.
But then there's the significant impact on Boeing at such a critical time for the company. And it shines a very bright, very harsh light on the safety challenges within India's rapidly growing aviation sector.
It really does. And it leaves us with this central nagging question, this puzzle. How could a technologically advanced plane like the 787, with such a strong safety record for 15 years, how could it crash just minutes after takeoff?
And that detail about the landing gear, still down during the climb, how does that fit in? What does it tell us about those final moments?
It's a piece of the puzzle investigators desperately need to place correctly.
Exactly. We live in an era where we're constantly pushing aviation technology forward, trying to make flying available to more people than ever. But what does a tragedy like this really tell us?
It tells us that maintaining safety is an incredibly complex, ongoing challenge, especially in these intricate global systems. And it reminds us that even with all our technology, sometimes aviation accidents remain profound mysteries, at least initially.
So the question for you listening to this, what further questions does this raise for you? About that constant tension, that balance between rapid growth, pushing the boundaries of technology, and that absolute fundamental need for safety in the skies.